Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Quick Tips for Entrepreneurs on the Healthtech Podcast. With me, or should I say back with me today, I have Nara Moripen. She's the founder of PAL. Has a very interesting and emotive story, I will say, about the founding of PAL based on a personal experience with her mum and palliative care, is now supporting so many family members with palliative care support, and has built an incredible business model around this with the product. If you want to hear all of that and more, obviously you can listen to the previous episode to this where Nara goes into her background, her personal story, and all about the product. But one thing that we didn't get to in the initial episode was, Nara, you went from a very corporate job into entrepreneurship. You went from a nice cozy salary, a nice cozy life, a nice regular paycheck, predictability, stability, all of those things, into the unpredictability and instability of entrepreneurship, but obviously very, very impact driven based on your own personal experience. So I'm interested, what would your quick tips be for people that are in that corporate job, looking to go into entrepreneurship? What would be your tips? What would be your advice?
I think that it was a good summary. The only thing that maybe didn't change were the work hours, but the other things, for sure, it was a really big change. I feel like some of my advice would be maybe not necessarily based on what I did, but maybe what, looking back, I would have done differently, because you of course have time to reflect and everything. So I kind of jumped very first. I just jumped into entrepreneurship after, or while I was on leave actually from my job. But maybe what I left out when I told the story was that I actually ended up doing kind of like an entrepreneurship program with an investor. So I went through the Antler program.
Antler, interesting.
Yeah. So it wasn't, you didn't get any money from participating. So it was sort of no financial gain from participating in the program. But me and my co-founder, we did end up getting an investment from them right after the end of the 3 months. They chose to invest in us then, and that did put me in a quite nice position where I was just done with my leave from consulting, and I now had an investor on board. So I would say I probably got quite lucky when it came to more like the financial considerations, because otherwise, had I not been in that position, where I could then pay myself a quite like small salary compared to consulting, but still it was enough to be able to at least pay rent and have some food and cover main expenses. But looking back, I probably would have done things a bit differently, where I probably would have done a bit like alongside work and probably started putting aside a bit of money. And then when I felt like things were a bit more stable, or I at least was perhaps ready to fundraise, or if I already had revenues, then I maybe would have stepped out or away from consulting then. So, and maybe this is just me thinking maybe I should have been a bit more risk averse looking back, and not just not planned for it per se.
So the accelerator program, interesting. Whether it was called that, or whether it identifies as an accelerator program, I don't know. But it certainly sounds like it. What was the benefit of doing that? Because obviously there's the very literal, okay, here's the workshops and stuff that they did. But did it give you confidence, or did you have that already? Did it give you network? Did it give you, like, obviously it put you on a path to a potential fundraise and like an investment committee at the end, which is great, and that's clearly an advantage there. But I guess let's hone in on that. So startup programs, there's the good, the bad, the ugly. People say do them. People say don't do them. People can be very clear on what their stance is on them. But you're obviously talking about the success of it. So what do you think that it gave you? Why do you think it was a success for you?
Yeah. So I'm definitely not recommending a program like that for everyone, but for myself, like, I would do it again because it was a very good fit for me personally. Like, looking back, I think I've always been quite entrepreneurial, but I think being in consulting for so many years, where you're used to then very, very much like a hierarchy, like you have, your superiors and you have the clients, and everything is very like you have your role kind of carved out for you, and you can be creative and you can show initiative like in that structure, but it's of course extremely different from being an entrepreneur. So I think I was maybe a little bit like insecure about like what will be required for me to not only become an entrepreneur, but also if I want to become a tech entrepreneur. That was very new to me. So I think it was a bit that lack of combination of lack of just like, is this the right thing for me? What do I actually need to do? A bit like questions around that. And also lack of network. The main people in my network were in consulting or friends from business school or people with corporate jobs, right? So I didn't really have a big network in the startup world, and I didn't really know where I would go to find someone that I would want to work with. So all of these were motivations to start Antler. And I think I did actually think maybe initially that it would be a bit more of a school where you kind of learn everything about how to be an entrepreneur. And of course, that's not the situation. They are more there to help you find a co-founder and to kind of help push you a bit along the process, but they're in no way going to do all the heavy lifting for you. So that initial expectation was a bit different. But I think it really was beneficial. I met my co-founder there, which, that was worth the whole 3 months on its own. But we also got like a good bit of pushing that helped us validate our idea very, very quickly. And I think we probably would have taken that a bit slower and kind of not pushed so hard in those first 3 months, maybe if we had met outside of the program.
So when you mentioned that you found your co-founder by luck last time, I think it's certainly an example of you creating your own luck, I suppose, rather than it being pure luck. That's awesome. So I guess what you're saying is that when it comes to accelerators, and or certainly in your experience then as, solo founder, no experience before, you didn't have what they were offering you. You didn't have the network, you didn't have the confidence, you didn't have the belief, I guess is sort of what you're saying, at least in some regard, or indeed the identity. And it sounds like that helped you with identity as well, to just say, hey, like, I guess there's other people like me here and we're all considered tech entrepreneurs, so maybe I'm one too. And actually that gives you the confidence to push on and do lots of other things, which is really interesting. Who would you say, just to finish, who would you say that, that program in particular is not for?
I think people who already have started a company, or they have a co-founder, or they have a very clear idea and they kind of already know how to get to that first revenue or whatever would be like the main traction that you're working towards. I think for those people, I would probably recommend to just do it yourself and kind of not spend time in Antler. But for sure, for people like me coming more from like a corporate background, I think it was godsend, and it just really put me on a good path to understand more, not only how the tech startup world works, but also just to understand how to get investment and how to approach investors. And I probably would have had to work a bit harder on my own to kind of figure that point out, because you get a lot of knowledge that's not necessarily written down anywhere, and you can get support with that. So yeah.
Awesome. Love that. Having run a couple of accelerators as well, the one thing I would say about them, for anybody listening, is whether it's an accelerator, whether it's someone you're introduced to, whether it's the next thing that you think is going to change everything, believe me, the cavalry isn't coming in entrepreneurship. There is no single thing that's going to solve all of your problems, despite an accelerator maybe saying they will as well, and they're going to do all this, that, and the other. No, the cavalry isn't coming. It is going to still come down to you, because what sort of lesson in entrepreneurship would that be on an accelerator, getting spoon-fed from stage to stage and eventually getting there? It really doesn't work that way. The other thing that I'd just add about accelerators, they're not a democracy. Actually, accelerators will, there are cohorts, there are people that do better than others. Nara is a perfect example of someone that was probably identified very early as someone that's smart, someone with a very good idea, someone with a business model, someone that's actually going to go and do this. She was put with someone that was a very good co-founder, I imagine, technically, and all the rest of it. And the accelerator gave them probably far more attention than anybody else, because they, as I say, are not a democracy. So if you are going to go into an accelerator and you have a nice cohort photo all together, those are your competition for attention and opportunities. So go into it with that mindset. In a similar way that if you're in a football team and you've got 3 or 4, you're a striker, you've got 5 or 6 strikers in the squad, they're your competition, not necessarily your teammates, because you've only got 1 spot on the team, or 2 or 3 or whatever. So yes, those are my additions to that. Cool. Well, thank you, Nara. Thank you for your quick tips. Thanks for joining us, everybody that's listening. If you want to listen to the full episode, you can go to the previous episode to this and get the full story and how Nara turned that accelerator into PAL. So thank you all for listening.